Imagine buying your dream home, only to be accused of trespassing the very first week. When a determined HOA president set her sights on Simone, what followed would shake the entire neighborhood. "You don't belong here." Those were the first words Simone Rafferty would ever hear from her new neighborhood, and they weren't whispered behind her back. They were flung at her face before she'd even had the chance to take a deep breath on her new front porch. But before that confrontation spiraled into something the entire block would be talking about, there was the moment she had been waiting for her whole life. The day she turned the key to her very own home. Simone was 44 years old, a financial analyst who had spent nearly 2 decades working her way up in Dallas. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. She was practical. Her spreadsheets were neat, her savings were careful, and her dreams had always been modest but solid. And topping that list of dreams had always been one thing: a home where her daughter, Camille, could come home from college and feel like she had roots. That's how she ended up in Plano, Texas, a suburb with wide streets, manicured lawns, and homes that carried that perfect balance of quiet and convenience. After years of apartment living, Simone felt something loosen in her chest as she signed the closing papers. This wasn't just property. It was her promise to herself that she had made it through the storms life had thrown at her. On moving day, the driveway looked like chaos, cardboard boxes stacked high, Camille laughing as she tried to wrestle a lamp through the front door, and Simone standing there with her keys in her hand, soaking it all in. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass, and somewhere nearby, a sprinkler ticked in rhythm. For the first time in a long while, Simone thought, "This is mine." But even in that first hour, there were signs. Subtle ones. A curtain across the street that twitched, then stilled. A man walking his dog who slowed down, staring just a little too long before offering a tight smile. Simone noticed, but she brushed it aside. Every neighborhood had its watchers. Every community had its gatekeepers. She wasn't going to let that spoil her moment. Inside, the house carried the smell of fresh paint. The walls were still bare, but Simone saw the potential in every corner. She pointed out where she'd put her mother's old dining table, where Camille's bookshelves would go when she came home for breaks, and where she might finally set up that reading nook she had promised herself for years. "Feels like home already," Camille said, dropping onto the couch they'd dragged in from the U-Haul. Simone smiled. "That's because it is home." The first few days went smoothly enough. Simone spent her mornings organizing closets and her evenings taking short walks around the block. A few neighbors waved. One older couple from the next street even brought over banana bread. But there was one figure she couldn't help but notice, always nearby, always watching. Her name, she would later learn, was Lorraine Pickford. She was in her early 60s, tall with sharp features, and never seen without her clipboard tucked under one arm. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't wave. She just observed. On the second day, Simone caught her scribbling something on her notepad while standing at the edge of the driveway. When Simone offered a polite hello, Lorraine turned briskly and walked away. Camille noticed too. "Mom, why is that lady always staring over here?" Simone gave a dismissive laugh. "Some people just like to feel important. Don't worry about it." But worry had a way of planting itself, no matter how often you tried to ignore it. By the end of the week, Simone was certain Lorraine had made notes about her car, her trash bins, and even how long she left her porch light on at night. Still, she tried to keep her head down. She told herself that blending in was the fastest path to peace. Then came Sunday, the first Sunday in her new home. Simone had just returned from the grocery store, arms full of bags, keys dangling from her wrist. Camille was upstairs unpacking boxes. The street was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet where even the sound of a trunk closing felt too loud. That was when Simone saw her again. Lorraine, marching across the street with a clipboard clutched tightly, eyes locked on her like she was about to deliver a verdict. Simone set her groceries down on the porch, bracing herself for whatever this was going to be. She didn't have to wait long. "You need to leave this property," Lorraine barked, voice sharper than the sound of gravel underfoot. Simone blinked, not sure she heard correctly. "Excuse me?" Lorraine's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is private property." Homeowners only. You don't live here." Simone let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "I'm literally carrying groceries into my house." But Lorraine didn't flinch. Her grip on the clipboard tightened, and her eyes narrowed with a cold certainty that made Simone's stomach drop. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something else entirely. But what Simone didn't know yet was that this first clash on her front porch was about to ignite something far larger than she could have ever imagined. The confrontation with Lorraine was still lingering in Simone's mind, but she refused to let it overshadow everything. Moving to Plano had been a deliberate choice. Safe streets, good schools nearby for resale value, and a neighborhood that, at least on paper, looked welcoming. She wasn't about to let one woman with a clipboard ruin the life she had built. The next morning, she decided to do what her mother had always told her to do in a new place. Show your face, smile, and make an effort. Simone laced up her sneakers and went for a walk around the block, partly for exercise, partly to introduce herself. Camille teased her from the window, saying she looked like she was campaigning for mayor. But Simone waved her off. She wanted to feel at home, not just live behind her own four walls. As she walked, the neighborhood revealed itself in small, ordinary ways. Cars pulled out of driveways with kids in the back seats munching on cereal bars. Sprinklers flicked on, spraying patches of grass already greener than anything Simone had ever managed back in her Dallas apartment. And dogs barked in fenced yards, tails wagging furiously at the sight of someone new. The first neighbor she met was a man named Richard Hanley, a retired engineer who lived 2 doors down. He was tall, slightly stooped, with thinning white hair and a warm handshake. "You're the new homeowner," he said, smiling. "Welcome to Stratford Drive. Been here 30 years myself. If you ever need tools, I've got a garage full I never use." Simone laughed. "I'll hold you to that. I've already discovered about 5 things in this house I have no idea how to fix." Richard chuckled and pointed a thumb toward the house across the street. "Don't let Lorraine scare you off. She acts like she runs the place, but most of us just try to stay out of her way." Simone raised an eyebrow. "Lorraine?" "Tall woman, clipboard, never smiles." Simone's mouth quirked. "Oh, we've met." Richard gave a sympathetic look, almost apologetic, as though the neighborhood owed her an explanation. "She's been head of the HOA board for years. Some folks appreciate her, but let's just say she doesn't know when to stop. If she thinks your curtains are the wrong shade of beige, you'll hear about it." Simone thanked him. And as she walked away, she couldn't shake the sense that Richard's words carried more weight than he was letting on. Later that week, she ran into another neighbor, a woman named Paula Jennings, while both were collecting mail. Paula was in her early 50s, her hair streaked with silver, her voice warm and energetic. She introduced herself with a smile that felt genuine. "Simone, right? My husband and I saw you moving in. It's nice to have new faces here. You'll love the neighborhood once you get past. Well, you'll see." Simone tilted her head. "Past what?" Paula hesitated, glanced down the street, then leaned closer. "Lorraine, don't let her intimidate you. She's run off good people before, but you don't strike me as the type to back down." Simone smiled politely, though her stomach tightened. 2 separate neighbors had now warned her about the same person. She wondered just how many stories Lorraine had left in her wake. That evening, Simone and Camille sat on their front porch, sipping iced tea. Camille was already rolling her eyes about the move, insisting she'd rather be back in Dallas with her friends. "You'll see," Simone told her. "This place is going to grow on you. It's clean, it's safe, and it's ours. That's what matters." Camille wasn't convinced. "I just don't get why that lady across the street has to glare every time we step outside. It's creepy," Simone sighed. "Because some people don't know how to mind their own business. But she's not going to run us off. We've worked too hard for this." As if on cue, Lorraine appeared again, walking briskly past with her clipboard tucked under her arm. She didn't look at them directly, but Simone could feel the weight of her presence, like a shadow cast across the yard. Camille muttered, "She's like a hall monitor who never retired." Simone laughed despite herself. That's one way to put it. Still, she noticed how Lorraine stopped briefly at the edge of their property, scribbled something, then moved on. It was the kind of action that seemed small, insignificant even, but Simone knew enough about people to understand that patterns mattered. And this pattern was beginning to look like a storm brewing. Over the next few days, Simone tried to focus on the positives. She decorated the living room, met another neighbor named Jorge Alvarez, who lent her a ladder, and even hosted a small dinner with Camille to celebrate settling in. Yet at the edges of every good moment, there was Lorraine, hovering, watching, waiting. The turning point came one Friday evening. Simone was hauling recycling bins to the curb when Lorraine approached. "You know," Lorraine said, her voice cutting through the evening air, "bins go out no earlier than 7 o'clock. HOA regulation. You're early." Simone, tired from a long day, forced a polite tone. "It's 6:58. Lorraine's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'll make a note." Simone felt her jaw clench. It wasn't about the bins. It was never about the bins. But what Simone didn't realize yet was that these small confrontations were only the beginning, and the real storm was about to break wide open. Sunday afternoons were supposed to be Simone's reset button. She'd go to the store, fill her cart with the week's groceries, and come home to the comfort of a quiet house. This particular Sunday in Plano started out no different, until it changed everything. The Texas sun was still strong as she pulled into the driveway, her car trunk packed with brown paper bags. Camille had been upstairs FaceTiming a friend, so Simone decided to unload everything herself. She balanced 2 bags in each arm, walked up the short set of steps, and set them down on the porch. The neighborhood looked still, the air filled only with the distant whir of a lawnmower blocks away. Then she heard the sharp clip of shoes on concrete. When she looked up, Lorraine Pickford was striding across the street like a soldier headed to battle, her ever-present clipboard tucked firmly under one arm. Simone didn't have time to process it before the woman's voice sliced through the air. "You need to leave this property." Simone blinked, stunned. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Lorraine stopped at the bottom step of the porch, eyes narrow, chin high. "This is private property. I don't know how you got in, but you need to leave before I call the police." Simone's mouth opened, then closed. For a moment she thought she must have misheard. But the certainty in Lorraine's voice left no room for doubt. "I live here," Simone said, pointing at the bags by her feet. "I just bought this house." Lorraine's grip on her clipboard tightened. "That's impossible. I know who lives here, and it's not you." Simone laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Ma'am, I signed the papers 2 weeks ago. I have the keys, the deed, the mortgage, everything. What are you talking about?" By now, Camille had come downstairs, drawn by the voices. She opened the front door, her expression flipping from curiosity to confusion. "Mom? What's going on?" "This woman is trespassing," Lorraine announced, loud enough for anyone within earshot. "She has no right to be here." Camille's jaw dropped. "This is our house." The volume must have carried down the street because a couple of neighbors emerged from their homes. Richard Hanley stepped onto his porch, arms folded across his chest, watching. Paula Jennings appeared at the edge of her driveway, phone in hand. A teenager on a bicycle slowed to a stop on the corner. Simone raised her voice, though it shook with controlled anger. "Lorraine, I live here. I'm not trespassing. I'm not squatting, and I don't need to explain myself to you." Lorraine scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "People try things like this all the time. Move into a house that isn't theirs, pretend it belongs to them. I won't allow it in my neighborhood." Simone's hands trembled as she pulled her phone from her pocket. "You know what? I'll show you right now." She unlocked her email app, scrolled quickly, and held the screen out. "That's my closing statement. You see the address. You see my name. Rafferty. Simone Rafferty. That's me." Lorraine didn't glance at the screen. She tilted her chin higher. "Forgery is easy these days." Camille gasped. "Are you kidding me?" Simone's patience snapped. "Enough! You have no right to accuse me of anything. This is my home, and you need to step back right now." Lorraine folded her arms, unmoved. "If you're so sure, then you won't mind if the police confirm it. Because I'm calling them." The words sent a ripple through the small crowd that had gathered. Paula lowered her phone slightly. Her expression caught between disbelief and anger. Richard shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Camille's voice rose, sharp and furious. Call them then. They'll see my mom owns this house. You're just harassing us because— Camille, Simone cut in quickly, placing a hand on her daughter's arm. Her eyes locked on Lorraine. Do it. Call them. I have nothing to hide. For a moment, the two women stood frozen, their standoff electrifying the air. Simone's heart pounded, but she refused to look away. Lorraine's lips pressed into a thin line as she pulled her phone from her pocket. A teenager's voice called out from the corner, phone raised. This is crazy. I'm recording all of this. Paula finally stepped forward. Lorraine, stop this. Everyone here knows she bought this house. I saw the moving truck myself. But Lorraine waved her off. You stay out of this, Paula. I know what I'm doing. Simone's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Every second of this felt like being dragged into quicksand, something ridiculous, humiliating, and dangerous all at once. She thought about what her mother used to say. There's a difference between keeping the peace and letting yourself be walked on. And right then, Simone knew she couldn't back down. But the longer Lorraine held her ground, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about rules. And Simone was about to find out just how far her neighbor was willing to go. Simone's heart was hammering, but her face stayed calm. Years of working in boardrooms with men who underestimated her had trained her for this, keeping her composure when everything inside screamed to explode. Still, nothing in her life had prepared her for being accused of trespassing in her own home, in front of her own daughter, by a woman who barely knew her name. By now, the small audience had doubled. 2 kids had stopped tossing a football to watch. A man with a Labrador paused on the sidewalk, murmuring into his phone. Cars slowed as they passed, their drivers rubbernecking to catch a glimpse of what was happening on Stratford Drive. And through it all, Lorraine Pickford stood like a general, clipboard clutched like a weapon, daring Simone to challenge her authority. Do you have any idea how you sound right now? Simone finally said, her voice steady but firm. Lorraine's expression hardened. I sound like someone protecting the neighborhood. People like you think you can move in anywhere, claim whatever you want, and we're just supposed to accept it. The words, people like you, hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Camille's fists balled at her sides. Mom, Camille, Simone interrupted quickly, her tone a warning. She wasn't going to let Lorraine twist this into an argument between a teenager and an adult. Instead, Simone pulled out her phone again, scrolling with quick precision until she found the scanned copy of her deed. She walked down 2 steps and held it directly in Lorraine's face. Read it. Right there. My name. This address. That's legal proof, signed and notarized. Lorraine's eyes flickered to the screen but never lingered. She tilted her head, lips curling in that same smug way she had when correcting Simone about the recycling bins. Anyone can print up a piece of paper. Doesn't mean it's true. Simone's patience cracked. Then what would be enough? A moving truck? I had one. Neighbors saw it. Keys? I've got them right here. Do you want me to walk you through the house and open every locked door? Richard Hanley finally stepped off his porch, voice carrying across the yard. Lorraine, for God's sake, we all saw her move in. Stop harassing this woman! But Lorraine barely flinched. She raised her clipboard, scribbled something with exaggerated care, and said, You can huff and puff all you want, but rules are rules. And until I get confirmation, you are not recognized as a lawful resident by this HOA. Simone barked out a laugh of disbelief. You don't recognize me. What does that even mean? This isn't your kingdom. You don't get to decide who belongs here. From the sidewalk, Paula spoke up again, phone in hand. Lorraine, I'm recording this, and I guarantee if you call the police, this video will show exactly who the aggressor is. Lorraine turned, eyes flashing. Put that phone down, Paula. You're interfering. Paula didn't budge. No, I'm protecting my neighbor, and I'm tired of pretending your behavior is normal. The crowd murmured, whispers of agreement, nervous shifting of feet. A woman in yoga pants leaned toward her husband, whispering something that made him shake his head. The division was clear, half disgusted, half silent in complicity. Camille, her voice trembling with fury, shouted, You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone here knows we live here. Why are you doing this? Lorraine whipped back around, her face flushed. Because order matters. Because this neighborhood has standards. And if we don't enforce them, people like her, she jabbed a finger toward Simone, will drag it all down. Simone stepped down the last stair, standing toe to toe with her. The world around her blurred. The neighbors, the phones, the dogs barking in the distance. All that mattered was making sure her daughter saw her stand tall. "Listen carefully," Simone said, her voice low but firm. "You will not speak to me or my child this way again. This is my house. I worked for it. I paid for it. And you don't get to rewrite reality just because you don't like who lives here." For the first time, Lorraine faltered. Her lips parted as though to retort, but no words came. Instead, she gripped her clipboard tighter, her knuckles white. Then she hissed, "The police will sort this out. Don't get too comfortable." She spun on her heel and stormed back across the street, muttering under her breath, scribbling furiously as though her notes could erase what had just happened. The silence left in her wake was heavy, broken only when Richard muttered, "Unbelievable." Paula crossed the yard and touched Simone's arm lightly. "Don't let her break you down. She's done this before. Just never this loud." Simone exhaled, steadying herself. "Before?" Paula glanced around, lowering her voice. "She's gone after others. Usually families who didn't fit her mold. People move out just to get away from her. But you? You stood your ground. That's different." Simone nodded slowly, though inside her chest a storm brewed. She had expected a fresh start here. What she got instead was a fight she never asked for. But if Lorraine thought this was over, she was wrong, because the next step in her campaign against Simone would escalate everything. By Monday morning, word about the porch confrontation had already spread down Stratford Drive. Simone could feel it in the way neighbors glanced at her, some with sympathy, some with pity, and others with that detached curiosity people wear when they're glad it isn't their problem. Still, Simone went about her day, refusing to cower. She had worked too hard for this house to shrink in her own doorway. But Lorraine wasn't done. It was late afternoon when Simone noticed her again, standing across the street with her phone pressed to her ear. She was pacing back and forth, clipboard under her arm, her gaze darting to Simone's windows as though taking inventory of her every move. Simone tried to ignore it, unpacking more kitchen boxes and humming quietly to herself. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Paula. "Heads up. Lorraine says she's calling the cops about you. Just wanted you to know before they show up." Simone felt her stomach sink. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and told herself not to panic. But the thought of police rolling up to her house over a neighbor's spite, it was infuriating and frightening. She glanced upstairs where Camille was sprawled on her bed, earbuds in, laughing at something on her laptop. The last thing Simone wanted was her daughter seeing squad cars in their driveway, lights flashing, neighbors gawking. 15 minutes later, there was a sharp knock at the door. Camille came bounding downstairs. "Who is it?" Simone's pulse quickened. "Stay back, honey." She pulled open the door to find 2 Plano police officers standing on her porch. One older with salt and pepper hair, the other younger, hand resting casually on his belt. "Ma'am," the older officer said, "we got a call from a resident who claimed someone was trespassing at this address. Said you might be occupying the home illegally." Simone let out a laugh that was more bitter than amused. "You've got to be kidding me." She gestured inside. "Come on, I'll show you everything." The officers stepped inside, their boots clicking against the hardwood. Camille stood in the living room, arms crossed, glaring. "Mom, she really called them?" Simone nodded. "Apparently so." She retrieved the folder she had kept on the counter, the deed, mortgage papers, utility bills already in her name. She spread them across the dining table like playing cards. "There you go. Proof. Signed, notarized, filed with the county. This is my house." The younger officer leaned down, scanning the paperwork. He looked up at his partner, then back at Simone. "Everything checks out." The older officer gave her a nod, his expression tinged with sympathy. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We had to respond. It happens sometimes when there's a misunderstanding with new homeowners." From outside, Lorraine's voice carried through the open door. "Don't let her fool you. She forged it." Simone's patience snapped. She marched to the doorway, pointing a finger across the street. "You see that? That's harassment. That woman has been following me, documenting me, accusing me since the day I moved in. And now she's wasting police resources because she doesn't like who bought this house." The officers exchanged a look. The younger one stepped closer to the porch, raising his voice. "Ma'am," he called to Lorraine, "we've confirmed everything. Ms. Rafferty is the lawful homeowner. There's no issue here." Lorraine's face darkened, but she shouted back, "You're making a mistake. She doesn't belong here." Camille came to the doorway, voice sharp with anger. "Leave us alone. You're obsessed." The older officer lowered his tone. "Ms. Rafferty, I can file a report if you'd like. What she's doing could fall under harassment. It might make her think twice." Simone hesitated, torn between wanting peace and knowing that bullies only stop when confronted. "Yes, file it. If she calls again, I want there to be a record that she's lying." The officer nodded, jotting notes on his pad. Lorraine turned on her heel, stomping back toward her house, muttering loudly enough for everyone to hear, "This neighborhood's going downhill." As the officers left, Paula crossed the street, shaking her head. "I'm so sorry you're going through this, Simone. She's out of control." Simone exhaled, her shoulders heavy. "Does she do this to everyone?" "Not everyone," Paula admitted. "Only the ones she thinks she can intimidate." Camille muttered, "She picked the wrong family this time." Simone gave her daughter a small smile. "That's right." But inside, her chest was tight. She knew this wasn't the end. Lorraine wouldn't stop until she either got her way or was forced to back down. And Simone had a feeling the next battle wouldn't be fought on her porch. It would be at the very heart of the community. But Simone didn't yet know that Lorraine had allies of her own, and the coming HOA meeting would put every tension on public display. After the police left, Simone thought maybe, just maybe, Lorraine would retreat. But by Tuesday morning, the tension was thicker than ever. Simone noticed Lorraine standing at the end of her driveway, clipboard balanced against her hip, scribbling as if every move Simone made needed to be documented. Trash bins, porch lights, where her car was parked. Nothing was too small for Lorraine to record. Simone tried to ignore it. She went about her workday, answering emails at her dining table, sipping coffee, and pretending not to see Lorraine loitering across the street. But by late afternoon, there was a knock at her door. When Simone opened it, Paula Jennings stood there holding a casserole dish. Her expression was soft, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had been holding something back. "I figured you could use a friendly face," Paula said, stepping inside. "Don't worry, it's chicken and rice. Nothing fancy." Simone smiled, despite the heaviness in her chest. "Thank you." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Paula said, setting the dish on the counter. She hesitated, lowering her voice. "I also wanted to tell you something. Something you should know about Lorraine." Simone leaned against the counter, folding her arms. "Go on." Paula glanced toward the window, as if worried Lorraine might appear on cue. "You're not the first person she's done this to. Years back, there was a family, the Rodriguezes. They moved in just 2 houses down from her. Within a month, Lorraine had filed 3 separate complaints. Lawn too long, paint color not in harmony with the block, cars parked in the street overnight. None of it was true. She just didn't want them here." Simone's stomach tightened. "And what happened to them?" Paula sighed. "They moved. Couldn't take it anymore. Before them, there was a single mom, Tanya Lewis. Lorraine accused her of running a daycare out of her house just because Tanya had kids over after school. She reported her so many times that Tanya packed up and left too. Camille had come downstairs by now, listening from the doorway. "So she just runs people off for fun?" Paula's expression hardened. "Not for fun, for control. Lorraine's been on the HOA board for over a decade. She acts like she owns this street. And the truth is, people are scared of her. She's loud, relentless, and she knows the bylaws inside and out. Most folks would rather stay quiet than risk becoming her next target." Simone shook her head slowly, her jaw clenched. "And nobody does anything?" "They grumble, sure. But when it comes down to it, people avoid conflict. Lorraine thrives on that. She counts on silence." Simone felt a burn in her chest, not just anger, but a deep, gnawing sense of injustice. She had worked her entire adult life for this house, for this stability, and she wasn't about to let a clipboard tyrant push her out. Later that evening, Richard stopped by. He had heard about the police visit and wanted to check in. He leaned heavily on his cane as he stood on Simone's porch. "Don't let her wear you down," Richard said. "She's been a thorn in everyone's side for years. You've got more backbone than most of us. That's what scares her." Simone offered a small smile. "She's not scaring me, just wasting my time." Richard chuckled. "Good, because rumor is she's pushing for an HOA meeting this week. Wants to make an example out of you." Simone's eyes narrowed. "An example?" "Yeah, she's going to spin it like you're breaking rules. She does it to put people on the defensive, make it look like she's keeping order. My guess is she'll bring up your trash bins or some nonsense like that." Camille groaned from behind her. "This woman is obsessed. Don't people see it?" Richard sighed. "Some do, some don't, and some just don't care enough to speak up. But at that meeting, everyone will hear it loud and clear. You'll have a chance to show the truth." That night, Simone sat at the kitchen table long after Camille had gone to bed. She spread out her paperwork, every document neatly stacked: closing papers, utility bills, HOA correspondence. She thought about her mother's voice again. There are battles you don't ask for, but once they arrive, you can't walk away. The thought of standing in front of an entire room, facing Lorraine's accusations, made Simone's stomach churn. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going anywhere. The casserole Paula had brought sat untouched on the counter. Simone reached over, covering the stack of papers with both hands. "Not this time," she whispered. But as the HOA meeting drew closer, Simone would soon discover that standing her ground meant exposing more than just Lorraine's hostility. It meant pulling back the curtain on the neighborhood itself. The community center on Parker Road was usually reserved for block parties, bake sales, and the occasional holiday craft fair. But that Thursday evening, its folding chairs filled with tense bodies, whispered conversations, and the kind of nervous energy that hinted trouble was brewing. Simone had been to corporate boardrooms before, even handled tense negotiations worth millions, but nothing prepared her for the strange theater of an HOA meeting. Camille insisted on coming with her, though Simone had hesitated. "Mum, you're not going in there alone," she said firmly. "If that woman tries to twist things, I want to be there to call it out." So the two of them arrived together, dressed neatly, documents tucked into Simone's leather folder. As they walked in, heads turned. Some neighbors gave polite nods, others avoided eye contact altogether. Paula waved them over, saving 2 seats near the front. Richard was there too, cane in hand, offering a quiet, "You've got this," as Simone sat down. At the head of the room, Lorraine Pickford stood like she was about to preside over a trial. Clipboard resting on the podium, lips pursed, she surveyed the room as if it belonged to her. When she finally called the meeting to order, her voice rang sharp and precise. "Good evening, homeowners. Tonight's agenda includes several points of concern. The first, and most pressing, involves the matter of a recent occupancy on Stratford Drive." Murmurs rippled through the room. Simone felt her pulse quicken, but she sat tall, eyes locked on Lorraine. Lorraine continued. "It has come to the board's attention that a resident has moved into a property under questionable circumstances. There are concerns about whether proper procedures were followed and whether this occupancy aligns with the standards and bylaws of our community." Camille leaned over, whispering fiercely. "She's talking about us." Simone whispered back, "I know." Before Lorraine could go further, Paula raised her hand. "With all due respect, Lorraine, everyone here saw Simone move in. She signed papers, hired movers, and has all the legal documents. What's questionable about that?" Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "Documentation can be forged, and I, as HOA president, have a duty to ensure the integrity of our neighborhood is preserved." Simone stood then, unfolding her folder with calm precision. She walked to the podium, her heels clicking softly on the linoleum. Every eye in the room followed her. She set her papers on the stand, looking straight at Lorraine. "My name is Simone Rafferty. I am the legal owner of 217 Stratford Drive. Here is the deed, the mortgage agreement, utility bills, and the confirmation of ownership filed with Collin County. All legitimate, all verifiable." She held each paper up for the room to see. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights above. Finally, Richard's voice rang out from the back. "Looks pretty clear to me." Lorraine's jaw tightened. She flipped through her clipboard with exaggerated movements. "Even if that is true, there are still violations. Trash bins placed at the curb before the permitted time. Porch lights left on past midnight. Landscaping not yet in compliance with HOA guidelines." A laugh escaped Camille before she could stop herself. "Porch lights? Are you serious?" Several neighbors chuckled. One woman muttered, "This is ridiculous." Simone placed both hands on the podium. "Let's be honest. This isn't about trash bins or porch lights. This is about control. Since the day I moved in, I've been watched, followed, documented, accused, and even reported to the police, who confirmed I am the rightful homeowner. What's happening here is harassment, plain and simple." The room erupted, some with applause, others with nervous chatter. Paula clapped loudly, her voice clear. "She's right." Lorraine slammed her hand against the podium. "Order! Order in this meeting!" But order was slipping from her grasp. A man from the back row spoke up. "You did the same thing to the Rodriguezes. And Tanya Lewis. We all remember. Are we really going to let this continue?" Another voice added, "She's been targeting people for years. We just didn't want to be next." The air shifted. For the first time, the tide was turning against Lorraine. Her clipboard, once a symbol of authority, now looked like a shield she was desperately clinging to. Simone took a breath, letting her voice soften. "All I wanted was to live peacefully in this neighborhood, to be part of it. But I won't let anyone bully me out of my own home. Not for bins, not for porch lights, not for anything." The room fell quiet, the weight of her words settling over everyone. Lorraine's face flushed crimson. She shuffled her papers, searching for control she no longer had. "We'll revisit this matter," she muttered finally, but her voice lacked its usual bite. Simone returned to her seat, Camille squeezing her hand. Paula leaned over and whispered, "You just shook the ground she's been standing on for years." Simone allowed herself the smallest smile, but inside, she knew this battle wasn't over. Not yet. Lorraine wouldn't surrender easily, but the meeting had cracked the facade, and soon the entire neighborhood would have to choose which side of the line they stood on. The morning after the HOA meeting, Simone woke to the sound of her phone buzzing non-stop. Texts, emails, even Facebook notifications, all tied back to what had happened in that cramped community center. The video Paula had recorded, where Simone stood calmly at the podium while Lorraine unraveled in front of everyone, had started circulating, not just among Stratford Drive residents, but across a wider network of local homeowners. Camille was the first to show her. "Mom, look, it's on the neighborhood Facebook group. People are already commenting." Simone squinted at the screen. There she was, frozen mid-sentence, her hand raised while holding up the deed. Below the video, comments scrolled faster than she could read. "She handled that better than I would have. About time someone stood up to Lorraine. This is embarrassing for the whole HOA." And buried between the support, there were colder ones. "She should have just complied with the rules. New people don't understand the standards we've worked hard to keep." Simone exhaled, handing the phone back to her daughter. "I guess the neighborhood's divided." That same division showed itself in real life, too. Later that day, Paula stopped by again, this time with 2 bags of groceries. "Just thought you could use a little extra," she said, her smile warm. "And for what it's worth, I think you handled yourself brilliantly last night." Not long after, Richard shuffled up the driveway, leaning on his cane. "You've got grit, Simone. I've been waiting years for someone to call her out. Proud of you." Those gestures lifted her spirit, but not everyone was so kind. As she wheeled her bins back from the curb that afternoon, a woman she barely knew, Melinda Brooks from 2 houses down, paused mid-dog walk and muttered loud enough for Simone to hear, "Some people bring drama wherever they go." She didn't stop walking. Simone's jaw tightened. She glanced at Camille, who had overheard. "See what I mean?" her daughter said. "They're picking sides." It became clear in the following days just how much the street had fractured. Neighbors who once waved at each other now crossed to the opposite side of the road to avoid conversation. Kids who used to play freely in front yards now hesitated when passing Simone's house, as if unsure whether it was safe to stop. And then there was Lorraine. She kept her blinds drawn most of the day, but Simone caught glimpses of her, standing at the window, phone pressed to her ear, scribbling in that endless clipboard. Lorraine hadn't spoken directly to her since the meeting, but Simone knew it was only a matter of time. That Friday, as Simone was watering her azaleas, Paula strolled over. "I thought you should know," she said, lowering her voice. "Lorraine's been calling around, trying to rally her allies. She's spinning it like you disrespected the rules, made her look foolish." Simone shook her head. "She made herself look foolish. I know that, and a lot of people know that too. But others? They've been under her thumb so long they don't know how to think for themselves." Camille appeared at the doorway, arms folded. "So what do we do? Just sit here while she keeps trashing us?" Simone turned the hose off, wiping her hands on her jeans. "No, we live. We keep doing exactly what we're supposed to do, because the truth speaks louder than her gossip." But the truth didn't stop the undercurrents of hostility. On Saturday, Simone found a note stuffed under her doormat. No name, no signature, just 4 words written in blocky, all-caps handwriting. "You don't belong here." Her hands trembled as she held it. Camille gasped when she read it over her shoulder. "Mom, this is crazy. We should move." Simone's eyes hardened. "No, that's exactly what they want, and we're not giving her the satisfaction." That night, Simone lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Camille's soft breathing in the next room. She thought about every sacrifice she had made to buy this house. The years of saving, the long hours at the office, the dreams she had built around finally planting her roots. She wasn't about to uproot them now. By Sunday, small acts of kindness began to balance the hostility. Richard left a box of tools on her porch with a sticky note. "Use these before Lorraine tries to fine you for hiring the wrong contractor." Paula invited her to a neighborhood coffee group that had secretly splintered away from Lorraine's watch. Even Jorge Alvarez, the man who had lent her a ladder the week before, stopped by with his kids to say they supported her. It was a reminder. Not everyone was against her. Not everyone was afraid. Simone knew the battle wasn't over. The street was split down the middle, and sooner or later, Lorraine would push for another showdown. But Simone also knew something Lorraine didn't. That once a community starts asking questions, silence doesn't protect the bully anymore. But what Simone couldn't predict was that Lorraine herself would soon face consequences more severe than she ever imagined, and the balance of power on Stratford Drive was about to shift. By the second week after the HOA meeting, Simone sensed a change in the air. The long, tense stares across the lawns were still there, but something new had entered the neighborhood. A kind of quiet rumbling, neighbors whispering to each other in clusters, voices lowered, eyes darting toward Lorraine's house. It started small. Richard mentioned it first when Simone saw him on his morning walk. "Word is, a few folks are talking about calling for a board vote. People are tired, Simone. You opened their eyes." Later, Paula confirmed it. She leaned against Simone's porch railing, arms folded, her voice a mix of relief and caution. "There's been a petition circulating. Homeowners are demanding a special vote to decide whether Lorraine should stay on the board. Honestly, I never thought I'd see the day." Simone raised her brows. "And who started this?" Paula smirked. "Anonymous. But I've got a guess or two." Sure enough, by Thursday evening, flyers appeared in mailboxes announcing a special HOA meeting. The subject line was blunt: discussion and vote regarding the leadership of current HOA President Lorraine Pickford. The news spread fast. On the neighborhood Facebook page, threads exploded, some defending Lorraine as a protector of standards, others slamming her for abusing her position, and right in the middle, Simone's name kept surfacing. Some framed her as the woman who stood up to a bully, others accused her of bringing drama into a peaceful street. When the night of the meeting arrived, the turnout was bigger than Simone had ever seen. People packed into the community center, folding chairs squeezed so close they clattered against each other when anyone shifted. Camille sat proudly beside her mother, clutching her arm. Paula and Richard flanked them, both determined to show their support. Lorraine entered last. Clipboard in hand, her face set in stone, she walked to the podium with the stiffness of someone convinced of her authority. But Simone noticed something new in her, an unease masked by forced composure. Lorraine knew the tide was against her. The vice president of the HOA, a soft-spoken man named Gary Winston, cleared his throat at the microphone. Tonight we've gathered to discuss concerns brought forward by residents regarding the conduct of our HOA president, Ms. Pickford. A vote of confidence has been requested. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lorraine raised her hand. Before any vote, I'd like to make my case. Gary nodded reluctantly. Lorraine straightened her shoulders. For years, I have dedicated myself to maintaining the integrity and value of this neighborhood. I've enforced the rules that keep our streets safe, our homes attractive, and our community respected. Yes, I have been firm. Yes, I have made difficult decisions. But I have always acted in the best interest of Stratford Drive. Without order, we invite chaos. A smattering of polite applause followed, but it was weak, hesitant. Paula whispered under her breath. Here we go. Simone rose slowly from her seat. May I respond? Gary gestured for her to approach the podium. Simone faced the room, her folder in hand, though she didn't need it this time. Her voice carried, clear and steady. No one here is against rules. We all want clean streets, safe homes, and pride in where we live. But there is a difference between rules and harassment. Since the day I moved in, I've been accused of trespassing in my own home, threatened with police, and humiliated in front of my daughter. That's not leadership. That's intimidation. Gasps echoed, followed by claps. A few people even stood. Lorraine's face burned red. That's one person's story. Not one, interrupted a man in the back. She did the same to us last year, complained about our siding color until we spent thousands repainting. Then she said the shade was still wrong. Another voice rose. She called the cops on my nephew when he parked in my driveway, said he looked suspicious. More voices piled on, like a dam breaking. Story after story of Lorraine's tactics, each one more damning than the last. Lorraine slammed her clipboard on the podium, the crack echoing. This is a witch hunt. You're twisting my dedication into something ugly. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. But the room no longer belonged to her. Gary raised his hand. We've heard enough. All those in favor of removing Ms. Pickford as HOA president, please raise your hands. The sea of hands rose like a wave. Simone's breath caught as she scanned the room. Nearly every hand was up. Paula's, Richard's, Jorge's, even neighbors who had once kept their distance now stood firmly against Lorraine. Gary's voice was calm but decisive. The majority has spoken. Effective immediately, Ms. Pickford is removed from her position. Lorraine's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. For once, words failed her. She snatched up her clipboard, muttered something unintelligible, and stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence she left behind. Camille squeezed her mother's hand. You did it. Simone shook her head softly. No, we did it. Everyone finally spoke up. The meeting closed on a strange note. Relief mixed with disbelief. People lingered, chatting in groups, some already laughing as if a weight had lifted. For the first time since moving in, Simone felt something she hadn't expected. Belonging. But even as Lorraine walked away in disgrace, Simone knew the real victory wasn't about a vote. It was about proving that silence gives power to bullies and courage takes it away. The night of the vote lingered in Simone's mind long after the last chair was folded and the chatter faded from the community center. When she and Camille stepped outside into the cool Texas air, it felt like the weight of weeks had finally lifted from her shoulders. For the first time since moving in, Simone didn't feel like a stranger on Stratford Drive. She felt like a homeowner. She felt like she belonged. The next morning, she was startled awake by the sound of laughter drifting through the window. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't mocking. It was kids playing on bikes again, their voices rising freely in the street. That hadn't happened since her first week in the house. Camille peeked out the blinds and grinned. Looks like people aren't afraid to come outside anymore. Simone smiled. That's how it should be. As the weekend rolled on, neighbors began approaching her, not just the ones who had already shown support, but others who had once kept quiet. Jorge brought his kids over with a plate of cookies, apologizing for not speaking up sooner. Melinda Brooks, the same woman who had once muttered about drama, stopped by to offer a stiff but genuine apology. Even Gary, the HOA vice president, came by in person. "You reminded us of something we forgot," he told Simone. "The HOA was supposed to serve the community, not the other way around. I'm sorry it took so long for us to see it." Camille, ever the skeptic, whispered to her mom afterward, "Guess you're a local celebrity now." Simone laughed softly. Not celebrity, just someone who refused to back down. Still, she knew the story wasn't just about her. At the grocery store, strangers approached Paula, thanking her for posting the video. Richard admitted he hadn't slept so well in years, relieved that the community had finally stood up. And little by little, the fear that Lorraine had cultivated started to crumble. People planted flowers without worrying they'd get a note. Porch lights stayed on longer without shame. Neighbors waved again. One evening, as Simone sat on her porch sipping sweet tea, Paula joined her. They watched the sun dip low, painting the sky in soft orange. "You know," Paula said, "you didn't just defend yourself. You gave everyone else permission to breathe." Simone glanced at her, thoughtful. "I didn't plan on being anyone's example. I just wanted to live in peace. That's the thing about standing up." Paula replied, "Sometimes it's not about planning. It's about doing what's right when the moment comes." Camille, sitting on the porch steps, chimed in. "Lorraine thought she had all the power. Turns out she only had what people gave her. Once you took it back, she had nothing." Simone reached over, brushing a hand across her daughter's shoulder. "Exactly. And that's the lesson here. Bullies don't thrive because they're strong. They thrive because people stay silent. When you speak up, when you refuse to let them control your story, you take their power away." For Simone, the victory wasn't about Lorraine losing her position. It wasn't about applause at the meeting or the comments online. It was about planting her roots firmly into the ground of a community that had once looked at her with suspicion. It was about showing her daughter that courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you don't let fear make your choices. Weeks later, Simone walked down Stratford Drive, waving easily to neighbors she now knew by name. Camille rode beside her on a bike borrowed from Richard's garage, laughing as the wind caught her hair. The house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like home. She paused at the edge of her yard, looking at the flowers blooming in her garden. For the first time since moving in, she allowed herself a moment of peace. A real one. And though Lorraine's blinds across the street stayed drawn, Simone didn't care. The story was no longer about Lorraine's hostility. It was about resilience. It was about what happens when ordinary people decide enough is enough. Simone turned to Camille with a smile. "This house was worth every fight. Not because of what it looks like, but because of what we proved by staying." Camille nodded. "We didn't just buy a home. We claimed our place." Simone squeezed her daughter's hand. "Exactly." And with that, Simone realized the truth she had needed all along. Home isn't just where you live. It's where you stand tall. It's where you decide you belong, and make others see it, too. The moral of Simone's story is clear. Prejudice often hides behind rules and authority, but courage and unity can break it apart. Stand tall, don't let fear silence you, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong. If you want more stories that uncover the power of resilience, community, and justice, make sure to subscribe so you never miss what comes next.